environment, it has certain politics in it. Each project define its own politics. How will controversies be solved? Because there are controversies in each, for example, in Wikipedia, before something gets accepted, it's always changing, obviously. It's a very dynamic website. But there are controversies and there are specific procedures that you follow to how to solve them when they emerge. There are power dynamics. It is true that it is direct and open, and in principle, everybody can contribute. But there are certain, it's not fully hierarchical. In fact, it's very close to not being hierarchical, but it's also not very horizontal. It's more heterarchical. It has some ad hoc hierarchies that are defined that play a big role in who has more legitimacy to accept a commit or to say, no, we are not taking this into account. But if we compare how those hierarchies in open source projects work to how politics based on political representation work, this one is less popularity. This one is not popularity based, or it's based more on knowledge and on things that current political systems are lacking. So that was another thing that I found really interesting when I decided to look at how do open source projects organize. So there are sanctioning mechanisms also. If someone can get blocked or cannot be allowed anymore to participate, to contribute. So there are some intrinsic politics on open source, and it depends on each project. We cannot say, oh yeah, they are all open or they all work the same. No, no, no. Each project creator, each benevolent dictator, like they are called, decides how to organize and which rule are to follow. But something really good that open source projects have, if you compare, something really good that they have is that even if there's a head of the project, for example, Linus Torvald in Linux, he decides basically everything, but if the system didn't work how the contributors want, there is the possibility for them to just take the source code and do with it whatever they want. So that possibility of forking, of taking things, of that possibility of exit gives it the strength, because then the person in charge is like, maybe I need to do things right, because if not, then the project will lose its legitimacy, or the most important thing of it, its users, contributors, etc. So, like I said, there are something really rich that makes open source projects so successful is that it's not based on people doing big things, big contributions. No, just small little contributions, distributed, decentralized, make the whole coherent body to emerge. And that is something really valuable, because it means it places the action capacity mostly on the bottom-up interactions rather than on who makes the final decisions in a top-down way. So, following this general introduction about open source, the hypothesis that I started to work with on the paper is that the dynamics of open source software production and open source communities, so which are the politics of open source and how do the communities organize or self-organize, provide good models and political principles for legislating at a global scale. So what I was thinking was, if we were to select a way, or to have a way in which, in a fully globalized world, we could define the rules of that society, then maybe open source would be a good model. So I'm not going to go too into that right now, but that was the general frame, the aim that I had back then. When I say back then, it's only been a couple of months, but a lot of things have changed. I'll mention them later. So with this hypothesis in mind, the goal of my paper was to use a thought experiment to propose a model for political legislation based on open source. So I wanted to use open source. I thought we could use open source to define those general rules of automatized systems in a society at local scale. So cities, how we would organize certain common-based technical systems in cities, and on the other side, how the community forums could be used to define the rules that we are going to implement in those systems. So there was a technical component, and there was also a social environment. Basically, with this, what I wanted was to move from hierarchical, closed, limited, top-down systems of decision-making to a more interactive and bottom-up and open and decentralized and distributed and hierarchical and egalitarian also way of doing politics, and also to regulate, because the current legislative systems that we have nowadays are very, very, very close. They present information as a black box where you have some inputs, and then nobody, unless you're part of that body of representatives, nobody can really have direct influence once the process of voting a decision has started. And then you have some outputs that are imposed in a top-down way upon the world, but there is no real interaction with the majority of citizens. So current legislative systems and decision-making systems, current governance systems in general, are linear, sequential, closed, they work as exclusive club practices. So it is not a very, there is really no difference between back then, when we had only one king or one monarch making decisions, and now where we have also one kind of king and a secluded group of individuals who support him or not support him, but who make decisions in a close way, and then it's the same topology, it's the same structure that has maintained, even if, in theory, the system of representation is different from where kings and emperors decided what to do. But it just shares the same topology with a very close group here on top, imposing upon the rest of the world. And even if there are some initiatives for citizens to, like referendums, to have a more direct participation, referendums or citizen initiatives, these have very limited capacities, and also occur in you can count the moments where they occur. And even if they occur, and if you can actually say, yes, it was a citizen initiative, then the action of it ends when it starts to be processed by the group of legislatives. So that was the theoretical background, or the theoretical aim that I had behind when I started to do this thought experiment. There are some antecedents in theory. There are a lot of groups of scholars who are now working on something called Government 2.0. All these trends about open data and governments putting things online. So there are some scholars that are working on that. For example, Douglas Rushkoff spoke about a network democracy, where he said that internet forums could replace deliberation practices. There is a really cool proposal. Matthew Burton, he said that just like there are peace corps supported by governments, governments could also have bodies of coders who would be hired temporarily to solve specific problems, and then would leave, just like people in the peace corps do. And also, Douglas Schroeder spoke about e-liberating, which was the same thing as deliberating in person, but just online. So it had the same shortcoming that you have nowadays with, for example, it needed a quorum, so it had certain limitations. All this is framed by something called the Renaissance, which like a new Renaissance, that is a theoretical proposal that what it says is that nowadays the change in society or the revolution, the big revolutions, politically speaking, will come thanks to internet-based technologies, and that this means that in order for us to produce big changes, we don't need big violent revolutions that, for instance, kill governors, but the change is just going to be slowly transformative from within. I agree with this, but I think that just leaving things to the natural evolution of internet-based technologies in our life won't be enough.
Are you saying I've wasted money buying a guillotine?
Buying out, yeah, I think.
Yeah, I wasted some money.
Yeah.
Should put away the guillotine.
Yeah. I wish this was a little better because I have a more optimal way, but I won't say that. I think it's not politically correct. They can't build with it. Okay. There are some precedents in practice that make this. There are some precedents in practice that are probably more important without disqualifying the theory, because these theories of government 2.0 trend is really interesting, but it has the same limitations that even if it seems to open the door to a more dynamic and horizontal world, citizen participation is limited in proposing governments what to decide about, what to think about, what to legislate. So some really interesting cases of new Renaissance practice that are slowly transforming the governance is, for instance, the Finnish equal law marriage was a law that was crowdsourced in Finland, and the final document was created on a Google Docs, so everybody could contribute. But it was a really interesting case. But what made that law possible to be successful compared to other practices where internet-based technology has managed to produce some changes in the political system, like in the Arab Spring, is that in Finland, the legislation that existed previously, the general body of legislation that made this possible, specified that it was possible for laws to be crowdsourced. So it wasn't that a group of citizens just said, hey, let's do this. No, the government had previously specified it. So it had plowed the land for this to flourish. Something that didn't happen in the Arab Spring. In the Arab Spring, you also had a transformation thanks to internet-based, but there wasn't something previously working on the land for it to go in better directions. There is a San Francisco, I'm gonna go forward. There is a San Francisco platform that is also framed by all these government 2.0 trends. And here, citizens can tell the local government of San Francisco, hey, this traffic light is broken, or there is trash here that needs to be taken away. There is an equivalent in London that I find really funny because it says things like overgrown grass, which isn't really a problem if you compare it with some problems that other countries have. But it's London, so I understand. So yeah, it's very interesting, but also the action of citizens just stays in, hey, governments, local government, we need this. And once you have those requests, then it's up to the traditional governors to say, yeah, we actually should do something about it. So it's very limited.
Do they vote to say that to show that there are many people?
I guess that's something they take into consideration, but all you do is, oh, I'm here and this bike has been here for a week. you notify it. It's very
I did that once in Brazil.
really with a bicycle.
With a bicycle, yes.
It was there.
Yes.
In Colombia, it would be stolen. So that's not really a problem.
Problem solved.
They do the work for the government. Lumio is a platform where people propose. They say they have a problem, they propose some solutions, they vote, and in a very simple way, then you all agree on an outcome. But it's private, it's fine, but that's just another example. The bad thing about it is that it works on a very small scale, so it's for very small, simple, tiny projects, which I guess is good because it allows more maneuverability capacity, but it remains short once you go to a bigger scale. And lastly, micronations. It's a really cool project. It exists, there are two types of micronations. One exists in Wikipedia, and the other one are micronations that exist in the non-internet world. So in micronations, you have people who decided to have their own state. And they have really complicated or complex, both complicated, complex, and also very well-defined laws. Some of them even have currencies and exchange services. So they have their own currencies, but the way in which they trade is by exchanging services. For instance, I need someone to design this for me, then someone designs the flag or something. They exchange things. And the territory of these micronations is the people's house. So there have been interesting cases. Oh, okay, yes, and you can become a citizen. You apply to the passport, and then let's say that you want your friends or your family to also become citizens of your micro-wiki nation. There's a lot of people spending a lot of time on this. I was about 3 Sundays ago in a deliberation of the General United Micronations, the GOM. And they were choosing, just like in the European Union, whether accepting or not certain micronations to the General Council, like the Security Council. Some of them were banned because they had been rude to others, they had violent tendencies, proposing wars, etc. Really, no, it was. I thought it was even more serious than the actual discussions of the United Nations. It was really cool. So there are people spending a lot of time on this, and it's something that they really take serious. The other case of micronations is people who not only have this space online, but I must have, yeah. Have you seen this image somewhere of Sealand? Sealand is one of there are, you don't want to live there, but this is an actual micronation. It's in international waters, but you don't want to live there because it's been burned down like twice already.
That could be one.
They also give passports to citizens if you want to become a citizen from there. The thing is with Sealand is that it's in international waters. So when it was built, it was during the Second World War. It was going to be a place where to command operations in the sea. But then the war ended, and in the 60s, a man decided to live there. And because it was in international waters, it didn't have, it wasn't, the British law couldn't frame it, so he said, I'm going to create my own nation. And during the whole Pirate Bay discussion, Pirate Bay wanted to put some servers there so that nobody tried to control the Pirate Bay activities. And they had some servers. Now they no longer give passports away, but this is just one of the many examples of micronations that are where people have had these initiatives of having their own countries. The thing with them, both the online micronations and the ones that have actual territories, is that they are one of the conditions that you need to be a nation in this world, in the offline world, is that other nations need to recognize you as such. So obviously, big nations haven't recognized them, with two exceptions. One, in Italy, there was a member, I don't remember which level it was, if it was national or more local, but there was a letter, because the micro wiki people send lots of emails and letters to politicians like, hey, recognize us. And one of them said, referred to one as Dear King, blah, blah, blah. So that was taken as a tacit acceptance of, hey, yeah. But anyway, that's parallel information. So why this is relevant? Why did I choose to focus on legislative practice? Well, the main reason is that legislation is that central bone or core in societies that frame what you can do and what you can't do. I mean, you can't do many things without getting in trouble, then legislation is there for that, but for you to get in trouble mainly. But the problem with it is that it, like I said previously, it works as an exclusive club practice. So if you are not part of the legislative body, you have limited capacities compared to that select group of individuals who can actually have a more direct participation or influence in the decision-making process. It's also very, one of its biggest flaws from my point of view is that it's based on popularity. Who can legislate? Well, those individuals who have been selected. Who can be easily more selected? Well, those who have all the economic power behind them and political power to become more, blah, blah, blah. We all know that story. So it works as a closed group body that it's ad hoc. Its own legitimation, it's itself. So that was one of the things that I thought open source could actually help us overcome that barrier. Why to think about it now? Well, there are some scholars already thinking about using internet-based technologies to make politics more participative, more collaborative, and more transparent. However, there are many shortcomings like the ones I've mentioned. The problems of closed structures is there, it's evident, so it is important to continue and try to open them until they are open. And also technically governments are also every time more and more and more opening their data, and at least theoretically they seem interested in transparency, participation, collaboration, etc. They seem, I emphasize there. I've spoken about this already. So another of the things that I was thinking about was that, and I've been thinking about this for a while, there are the structure and the dynamics of the political systems that we have don't really correspond to those of the human social system. So they work more as inhibitors than what they actually allow the complexity to prosper, to continue developing. They block complexity, they block diversity. Even when they accept certain types of diversity, they do so like if whatever they regulate about wasn't happening for a long, 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 long time. And if a new type of diversity emerges in the system, then a long time goes by until it becomes regulated. So there are many limitations. I think that there are more, we can find better ways of achieving self-properties in how we organize, like self-reparate, self-configure, and I think that governance and how we legislate nowadays, what they do is that they need it more than what they let these properties that are, if human social systems are complex systems, then we have the capacity to, or the tendency to self-organize. And maybe we could do so if we didn't have institutions, closed, hierarchical, and linear institutions imposing artificial order upon us. So this is a bet for opening the system more and more and more. I think I've already said this. So the what I did was a thought experiment. I thought, okay, in a world where nation states didn't exist, and we were to find a good way of doing the rules, of deciding the rules in our society, how would this be? So for that, I apologize for this very long definition, but I define open source legislation as a decentralized or distributed, open and hierarchical, because I have said that just like in open source environments, there would be nested hierarchies, things that exist temporarily, obviously, not like now that presidents and prime ministers are there forever, even if the person in turn changes. A hierarchical dynamics of decision making for a frontierless, so I was assuming that there wasn't going to be any political barriers, any countries, as any nation state, sorry, on life. On life is a word that has been coined to frame how we live nowadays. We don't live, well, with a few exceptions here, we don't live fully online, we don't live fully offline, we live online. This is a new word that I really like. A complex world that uses the principles and platforms of open source for making decisions related to problems of the common at a community or vice versa. So what I was thinking here is that I just eliminated completely from this whole experiment the existence of nation states. I thought, okay, maybe there would be some manipulations at a local level or the globe, but not that mezzo level, not that intermediate level that nations are today. So I was thinking, yeah, maybe we can have some local, not authorities, some local systems of governance, or maybe we can have some a global general system of decision making. Maybe also some interactions at different levels, but definitely not nation states like that, like those big mediators that we have nowadays.
This is the cheating stuff.
Hi.
You know, going from this is the. I mean, I like. This is all interesting. I'm just saying that the jumping from the we live in a world where the whole field is dominated by nation states to the field where there are no nation states. That's the tough thing to think. So you know, just jumping from the one field to the other.
It's not necessarily that tough because you can start up with independently of the nation states, and by the time they start to become the same kind of problem, this can already be international. I mean, after all, the World Wide Web was not created by any nation state, was not legislated by any nation state.
And same with the sharing economy. You know, even the sharing economy could be against. Well, I'll let you.
No, I agree with your comment. If we locate ourselves in time, in a moment where everything is in life, but there are no geographical barriers, political, then for us to think that as we embed more and more and more internet-based technologies in our life, the whole role of nation is just going to become less and less and less important. I mean, you see nowadays, cities are already, when you travel, you go from one city to another city, or go from one country to another country. You move between cities, and local authorities are recognizing the power that they actually have, the capacity that they have to transform the environment in a direct way. Because local means global, it means here, but nations, it's a more political thing. It doesn't have real touch with the real world.
Yeah, and
So-
they're becoming increasingly empty forms.
They aren't.
Well, they are empty forms.
Yes.
But I mean, just in the people who are on the stage of these forms, their function is increasingly becoming like a reality TV show.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. They're just there symbolically, but the real transformation comes from local communication, local networks, and if we by means of those local interactions, some other levels emerge, then at least it will be more natural than us being born now in a day that already has them previously defined and they don't really mean anything. Because what a state is, it's a collection of population, a territory, the recognition of other nations, and some laws. But the territory is becoming less and less and less important, at least theoretically speaking. And we can see this, I will touch this point further on in the talk, but nowadays we have, for example, we're in Brussels, and just last month we had a few terrorist attacks that were committed in the name of a terrorist organization by people who didn't have direct links with these terrorist organizations. So we are deterritorializing political identities, is how I call it. And so that element of the territory of nations and what makes it a national or a member of this nation is becoming a bit blurry. Also, I don't know the point. Forgot the other point, and hopefully I can remember it. It was more important. Yeah, okay. It will come back. If it's important, it will come back. So yes, like I said before, this done by means of automatizing certain things and controversy forms on the other hand. So that was what I did. And the information to define automatic things could be, oh yeah, this, I forgot to say this. It's a world where the Internet of Things is here. You know that they always say, oh, the Internet of Things will come in 2022. It's not really something that will come. It will slowly develop as we connect more and more and more our devices and our lives, and as we just blur the difference that there is between virtual and real, online, offline, my inner self with my connected self, etc. So I did a thought experiment and I defined some of the characteristics that this global legislation system would have. And the first one was that it was going to have direct political participation. So no nation states, no representatives, and I just came and left again. No nation states, no representatives, and I forgot. And no citizenship. So rather than you being yes, I remember now. So the other element that nations have is a bunch of symbols like flags and anthems that they are supposed to give you a national identity. But as more as the general identity of a community located in this territory becomes more diverse and less easy to tag, then you can no longer speak about a nation because it doesn't have all those symbols that embrace it, that cover them, and that you can identify as one single thing. That was the point that I had. So, an internet, what it's making is that it is opening the door for you to be more what you want to be rather than what you were supposed to be. Not because I was born. So you can have someone in the other side of the world sharing more traits with you than someone who was born in the same territory or in the same nation where you are. So we are slowly deterritorializing. That was the point that I had. The other is that we would have to consider on life. So if in terms of legislation, what this would mean was that just like in open source, where everybody can contribute to a project no matter where they are, then if we were to have a global legislation system, then anybody, no matter where they are, would contribute. But then this would mean that if we are going to regulate something that actually has to do with a physical territory, then we could have dynamics of online post-colonialism. Because let's say that a group in one part of the world wants something that is located in the other part of the world, in that territory. Then they could organize. And because the system is there for them to directly contribute into the coding of a decision, then they could become sufficiently strong to actually achieve something. And that was one of the caveats that I have. I'm gonna spoil this, but the the thought experiment failed because I realized that we can't really apply so easily the principles of open source into legislating at a global scale, and this was one of the reasons that made me realize that it wasn't as easy as just saying, okay, this works in software production, let's do it to organize ourselves politically. I'll explain with an example. Let's say that we have a territory, a green territory that also has very rich underground resources. And the people who are located there in that area want it to be protected. They don't want any external intervention. But because anybody can automatize the diggers that are going to go there and extract the resources, then this group of people can become, like I said previously, sufficiently strong to make a really strong case to make this digging automatic. And then we will have an online facilitated post-colonialism. So that was one of the caveats that I had. Probably the second biggest one for why I think that it wouldn't be possible to legislate allow open source. Yeah. Another reason was that we would have more lone wolf terrorism like we had here in like Belgium last month, or like the Orlando Gay Club. When I prepared this presentation, it was more or less 3 weeks ago, and and just yesterday I had to add 2 more cases. So it is a phenomenon that is increasingly being facilitated by the internet, and that if we're more and more and more having online lives, and if the internet allows you every time more to access worlds beyond the physical limits of your territory, we have to continue increasingly considering more dynamics of lone wolf terrorism, where someone just sympathizes with a cause, even if it's geographically far from where that person is located. It can be, yeah, any cause. Here we have all from jihadi sympathizers to anti-sexual orientations. So if there is fully lack of regulation, and this is something I'm struggling with because I'm an anarchist, that if we just let the system to fully self-organize without defining local nodes of regulation, then these are problems that we are going to have. Or what interests me, or at least touches me as a researcher the most, is what we do with animal abuse or child abuse. As a very deep animal lover, or someone who comes from a very insecure country, like I was telling Evo, I would trade security for surveillance. And for me, as an anarchist, this is something that goes completely against my principles. So the fact that this thought experiment of open source kind of failed because I realized that it's not as easy, I will continue to find a way in which we can force the state on, or in which we can have more direct political participation because I I'm going to live until then.
Well, I always say it's anarchism is like tolerance. You want to tolerate everybody to do whatever they want, but you can't tolerate intolerance. So if people want to do things that restrict your freedom, you have to restrict their freedom to restrict your freedom. So somebody wants to shoot you because you're gay, you have to restrict their freedom to do that.
Exactly.
So you need some kind of regulation, even if it's intolerance towards the intolerance.
Yes, I agree with that.
And the same way you encountered this problem in the thought experiment with just local bottom-up self-organization, that's one of the reasons in the paper I wrote about, I tried to emphasize the notion of the commons as an organizing principle, because it's not just local bottom-up self-organization. But I guess we'll talk about that.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that was one of the fatal problems is the one you recognize. Another one is, for example, the open source legislation. You know, what are you going to do with Trump supporters? You know, these are just as an example. Like I'm not saying there are a lot of people that want to do like what Francis was saying. You can't tolerate the intolerant.
Trump supporters,
There-
you introduce them to you having supporters, and it's not recorded.
It is. It is.
There are a lot of people, if you open up the legislation, they'll say, let's build a wall. So,
Exactly. So that's one of the problems I'm dealing with at the moment. I have 4 years to think about it. Hopefully, or probably like it happens as a scholar, you open more problems than the ones you actually solve. But yeah.
I'll give you some suggestions.
Oh, thank you very much. And this I've already mentioned in it. Was thinking of a world with hierarchies, mainly conformed by local interactions and global emergencies, but no meso levels. At least no generalized meso levels like now, that we have cities and in a general higher level, we have nation states. No, it would be more, it would parallel more the natural diversity of human communities if there were maybe a few nations here, a few other ones here, but also other types of political organizations that wouldn't be restricted to cities, nation states, and a few very exclusive general global systems. The theory that was all across, or that is all across my research, is interactive information processing and how how complex systems process information in a multi-scalar way by many agents with different levels. So this is the general, how to call it, the general background, theoretically speaking. But on one side I have complexity, on the other side I have interaction. And whatever I will end up with at the end of these 4 years, it will be permeated by those two. Interaction on one side and complexity on the other side. Incomplete. The thing is that I already spoiled the thought experiment, but I was thinking that whatever a global legislation system be, it would have to be incomplete. Not like now where we have laws and laws or whatever normativity we're thinking of define in a very close way a world that they have encoded. No, we should accept that the world is always changing, transforming, so a more organic way of doing regulation would be to accept without having to go back to this chamber and then to this one and to this one and making a decision that by the time it comes out the system has already been transformed. No, maybe a more organic way would be to just accept that the regulation that we come out with, it's incomplete. Whatever that means, that it's open to transformations, openings to more input, something like how open source software work. They are incomplete, they are never finished, they can always have space for direct contributions, to go back, so it's in most of the cases to go forward, but they are open in that sense. They are not fully finished. They are open. And forkable. This was another of the things that I thought, this would be really cool if we could actually fork the state without getting in trouble. And what this meant, extrapolating directly the principles of open source to socio-political interactions, would be that we would have freedom of expression and assembly, and just copy that directly from the First Amendment from the U.S. Constitution that says that there are freedom of assembly, etc. But if this were actually true, then it would mean that you could not be part of the U.S. if you were born there. Why do I have to have a Colombian passport, for example? I never chose to be Colombian. Or if I had been born in the U.S., I didn't choose to be a member of the U.S. So if the U.S. was actually free, then maybe people would be able to decide to be outside of that nation, even if they were in the same territory. So it's not really free, there's not really... Okay, so this would be, this, if we were to legislate at open source, then this forking capacity would be something that the legislation would have, just like in open source you have the code and you create your own project. So then here you would in theory be able to have your own, to take your laws or regulations and create your own nations. But that again, even if it seemed really appealing at first, then it took me to the question, what if micropowers that oppose each other emerge and then we end up having a very violent world? So that's another reason why I think it's not as easy to just have open source regulation at a global level. Yeah. The caveats and possible problems that this proposal would have is that, like I mentioned, we would have an online post-colonialism where, depending on how well a group manages to self-organize, that could go in the detriment of the self-organization of another group if we just leave it without regulation. The second one was that relying so much on online means opens the door for possible hacking. So you could have an agent that pervades the system, tweaks it, and you have an outcome that maybe you don't want to have or that it's not convenient to have. So hacking is another problem that emerges. But then, in order to avoid hacking, then you have to have some sort of anti-hacking, this is not the right word, but some sort of anti-hacking police that ideally would be distributed. But if it's distributed, then it's not as easy to organize. But if it's not distributed, then it can be co-opted by a single group. So that's another problem that I
This
have.
is solved by open source. This
It is?
exact problem is kind of solved by open source because you have security protocols which are open source. So yeah, it's a problem for them, but then closed source they have more problems. I think it's,
Yeah, and in the offline world of politics, who would be in charge of that?
offline. I don't know.
Offline.
Why do you need to have this? Like, I think it's a kind of an error to think that okay, if we put everything online, then it's less secure. But if it's offline, then we even do not know what's happening there.
Uh-huh.
Nobody
Yeah.
can have an access. So I think it's kind of not
Yeah, ideally you should be able to choose which protocols to be ascribed to, or which rules to follow, or which system to ascribe to. But again, if you have that possibility, then just like you can have it and for it to be convenient both for you and for the community where you are part of, online or offline, doesn't matter, then other people could do that in a non-beneficial way for the whole system. Please elaborate because I really have that problem.
Well, I'm not sure I understand the situation that you described.
So, if the system, in order to avoid the platform to be co-opted, so you have two options, either one single platform or many. If it's one, it's easily co-opted. If it's many, then you would have to define some sort of regulation for it to work as it is not as it is expected, in a convenient way, in a general sense. Okay. Yeah, I'll come to you also.
I think you don't even need that for solving this. It's a regular, like whatever, OpenSSL, for example. Okay, it's sort of open. Of course, things are based on certain protocols which are sort of globally accepted, but then, probably nobody really top-down decided that we will work with this protocol and everybody else go home. Just kind of emerged, and then everybody sort of started to work with certain protocols because they were the best.
But in the offline world of politics, I agree with you completely. But what if you have a diversity in the real world of interest? In fact, sometimes people are not fully rationally oriented. You can have people, this is just an extreme case, psychopaths, with completely different.
Yeah, so what's wrong with psychopaths? How they are going to sort of corrupt the system?
Well, maybe someone who doesn't really have any interest and that sees it as a zero-sum world, then he hacks it, makes something automatic that would go in detriment of the whole society.
Yeah, but
I think hacking is a technical problem in the end. I mean, in the beginning there will always be some bugs and some weaknesses, but if you work long enough and it's open enough and enough people look at all the possible flaws, I think the weak points will generally disappear. That's what you're trying to say, that in open source, typically they settle on a protocol that everybody has looked at and that is kind of secure and that people trust. And
there is a law called Linus law,
yeah.
which was not invented by Linus Torvalds, as I know. But it says that the more eyes look at the same thing, the more all the D problems can be solved if more eyes are looking at them.
That all bugs can be erased if enough eyes look at the code. So
I like that.
it's kind of not you can find it on Wikipedia. I did not formulate it sort of precisely.
Like the graceful theory that
What?
says that if more people, that you can have better solutions by consulting a large pool of non-experts than a small group of experts.
yeah,
It's I guess related, but not exactly that, because when you have this
it's also
protocol,
the idea of anti-fragility or variation natural selection. The more different problems and shocks and perturbations you submit something to, at the end, if it has survived all of them, you will be pretty sure that it is viable. So the more people look for bugs and try to hack it, and because what they do is that they give sometimes rewards for people who can hack a system just to find the flaws. That's the way to do it. The more people do it, and you find all the weaknesses, that's the more secure your system becomes. And the more open it is, the more people are going to find those weaknesses. Which is the difference with the government, where there can be one guy corrupted, but if he's in a very central position, nobody may find out. Because he's making his own decisions, and we don't know that he's actually putting money from the government into some Swiss bank account.
And it's more convenient if the corruption cascades for those involved than if it just stays there. And it's another problem that you have when you have this top-down distribution. So here is that corruption just easily pervades the whole system.
I think that's precisely one of the things about open source, because it's open and everybody can look at it, all the eyeballs. It's not more difficult to hide any weaknesses or any corruption.
Yeah.
But I think it can also be used like offline, like that. If people like accidentally when they see something like somebody, like your example with the meat really, or with other people or whatever, if they act against it and always if there's like something going wrong, and you will act against it, or it will be like a constant dynamic, like you find out what's the best way to act against it.
It also relates to the concept of surveillance. Do you know what surveillance? It's not surveillance from the center, from the top. And surveillance, that means that everybody from below looks at everything that goes on. And whenever something is spotted, like police abuse or a crime or drug dealing, you tell the others about it. It's much less likely that these things will happen. The larger the number of people who watch out for these things, the more difficult it becomes to hide this kind of connections.
So you think I should stop seeing deviations in the system as something inherently bad?
If there is a mechanism to quickly spot the deviations, then the deviations are actually good. Because the deviation tests the system. That's the principle of anti-fragility. You subject the system to all kinds of problems and challenges, and it learns from them to become more robust. It becomes more robust by being challenged more, by having more problems.
There is a book which is named by
Yeah, like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's
Right.
very easy to read this principle.
Yes.
And actually, it says that exactly what you said. You shouldn't fear perturbations. You have to do that for the system. Otherwise, the system will kind of collapse one day.
But even if there can be ongoing, like you said, ongoing retaliations forever. So if you want to burn down a zoo because you don't like animals being kept in jail, then someone who does think that's fine can do something against you. And
Well, yeah, that's different. It's in this case, it's one against another. Here we're speaking about more about the system, which is kind of the collective that people kind of agree about is the best up to now, and then individuals trying to find weaknesses in the systems, attack the system, and then the system learns from the attacks and becomes even more robust. And if that goes on long enough, then you can trust that the system really cannot be corrected.
Yeah, but there's not really one system or like one thing that everybody agrees on what the best.
No, but we're speaking about something like an open source platform. Like, you don't have to agree that this is the best, but if everybody uses it and it works, well, then, yeah, why not use it?
Yeah, but
And
we
the
want
more
to try
people-
to generalize it to like society.
Well, to have open source legislation, that's still a different problem. There are quite a number of other problems about it, which I would like to discuss, but maybe after the presentation.
yeah, I'm already finishing. Another problem, and I'll go quickly through the problems, is that if the importance of territory blurs, and if you have no ownership on it, right, then you can have many individuals or groups claiming the same thing in the territory. And that's another problem that I don't know how to solve.
I would say it depends on the definition of territory. If territory is in the old sense of a piece of land, then I think the idea is that ideally, as much as possible, land should be commons. You may own your house, and maybe a little bit of garden around it, but all the rest should be commons. On the other hand, territories in the virtual sense, everybody can make his territory on the internet,
Yeah.
his own forum, his own website, his own platform, and he's the boss in that territory.
Yeah, exactly. So virtual reality would actually have, I think, a decrease in long-haul terrorism, because many of yeah, in your virtual world you can be whoever you want. And you can choose not to feel oppressed or not to feel that
Well,
you.
there's a classical example of Second Life, the virtual
Uh-huh.
reality where people can create their own cities and design them in three-dimensional and have their own people who are allowed in their own rooms,
Uh-huh.
and that can go and go and go.
And more people, there are a lot of people who live in Second Life. And just go to the toilet in the young world.
It's not really healthy, but and Second Life, I mean, I have also been playing around a bit in Second Life for a while, but after a while, unless you're kind of
Actually,
an addict, you get bored of it, because it's still not real life.
And the graphs are not really good.
Yeah,
but I read that the divorce rates are about the same as in real life.
The what?
The divorce rates in something like in real life, they're about the same. Yeah, there's more premarital sex.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Look, I think one of the big benefits of the internet is that it just has increased the number of degrees of freedom so large that people can just do what they want in their own little community on the internet and they don't bother anybody. I mean, if you are a lover of I don't know what weird kind of sex, you can find your forum and discuss that and exchange self-made movies, etc. And as long as you don't harm anybody who does not belong to the community,
Like,
you can do it. I mean, why not?
like black cat pornography.
Yes, no, if someone is a psychopath who needs to take it a step further, just not be on the deviation, then maybe
And
you
then
can have
you get-
virtual rape,
Yeah,
and
and,
it's fine.
yeah, okay. If it's virtual rape with people who are willing to do it,
No.
you are willing to be virtually raped. I
In
mean.
your own world.
Okay, yeah.
But I could imagine that then advocacy groups would emerge of people trying to defend the rights of these artificial things. Because when you have a kid that looks like this and you don't really anthropomorphize it, then it's fine. But when you start
If you
giving
do.
it human characteristics, and
If you do a traumatize,
if you do, then and if you actually start seeing it as a person, if AI is granted in the future legal personhood, although both concepts, like Evo and I were talking, don't really parallel in the same time frame, but if AI would have legal personhood, then I can see groups of people advocating in favor of the rights of AI for them not to be exploited.
so then virtual worlds do not solve the kind of
They
The
would,
problem.
but there's always annoying people. Yeah, I think those are my problems. By technical costs of entry, I meant that you need to know how to code in order to make something automatic, but then I thought not really, because if this were to be true, then we would be in a world where just like now kids learn several languages in school, then coding would be just something that would be taught or learned.
It's good holding them.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you mean by anarchy? Is it so organized versus anarchist functional?
Well, that's just my own internal debate. Where do I stand? How do I see anarchy? Because it's definitely the way for me, but I just, due to the problems that I have with
Anarchy or anarchism? Because,
anarchism.
yeah.
Yeah, because anarchy will be anarchist. So anarchy as a system that is self-organized or locally regulated, or a system that has no regulation at all.
That's what you need maximizing.
Yes.
So no constraints.
No constraints at all.
The problem with no constraints is that it can be abused by free riders. That means it's, as I said, intolerance towards intolerance. If you are tolerant and you allow everything, and some guy next to you is intolerant and he starts hitting everybody who doesn't do what he says, yeah, you have to do something against that.
Yes.
Because otherwise you get the phenomenon of warlords who may be a very peaceful, I gave the example now, maybe a very peaceful medieval village where all the farmers are living as a collective, as an anarchist collective, and then some knights with horses and swords come, and they kill a few people and they rape a few women, and they say from now on you will pay tribute to us and you will pay us that much, or we sack your village.
Yes.
Because
And
of
And that
then
happens?
peaceful anarchism has gone.
I think it's
Yeah,
because we've got a huge problem with knights on horses these days.
No, no, but that's really what happened. What
No, I know
made
that.
the knights
I know
into knights was that they had horses, they had armor, they had weapons, which was something to which the farmers simply had no. It was the equivalent of having a machine gun now.
But I think it's especially always in the anarchists who will always try to act against these things. So I think you're.
Yeah, but if your opponent has weapons that you don't have, you can say, okay,
I
let
think
the
that-
three farmers go together and with their sticks try to fight that knight on a horse who
I
can
think
just hack off the head while he's in an armor and they
I think
just have
it's
sticks.
easy like direct military confrontation or something would work with our thinking that we were like more decentralized. That like one of the things why power can be there is also because there's like the whole group of giving consent or something. It's also all to fight against this whole
Yeah, but
dynamic.
what you do in the end is you say decentralized, but what you mean is that the farmers should agree about a strategy.
No,
Which
I
means
think-
that they're basically agreeing about some kind of a system to stop
No,
this kind of
I
thing.
think
Which means that they're agreeing about some kind of a form of governance.
no, I think the best strategy is always like diversity of tactics that everybody uses his own method and you will have a diversity which is
I
more
don't
variety.
think that works against a highly centralized efficient enemy. That's divide et impera, divide and conquer. I think Caesar would have liked it if all the different tribes in Gaul had all different tactics and all
I think
not
he would
united.
I think he
He
would have
just walked over them.
he would have difficulties because he would always like he would never know where to attack and where to go.
Well, still, Caesar managed to conquer Gaul pretty quickly with his highly centralized
Yes, because probably they were
army.
just trying to confront him directly centrally or something. Not really well.
Are you saying something that you think, or are you saying something that's kind of based on something?
I don't think we know enough about
Because I think
tactics
this
of
thing can be-
the Gauls, but I think that they were pretty.
It's not tactics. You can say this whether I'm better off by with coordination or without coordination, because everybody does whatever she or he wants. It's no coordination. So
I think there will be like stick more to coordination because people see what other people do, they will see what works, what won't work, there will be like a variation and selection mechanism.
I think that sounds much too idealistic. Look at how the Indians fought against the American settlers. It was very coordinated and they lost pretty quickly. There were a few moments when they coordinated and then they managed to drive the Americans back for a while.
Also, I think it has to be taken into account that not everybody is interested in being part of every fight, of every cause.
And it's always much easier to let the others do it.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't, for instance, as an
But,
individual.
yeah, well,
as
that's also what the diversity of tactics of like some people who like want to fight, some people who want to like. I mean, it's also like, for example, doing more theoretical stuff, more thinking. Like diversity of tactics come from activist things, and then some people like want to go into street direct confrontation or something. Some people want to like maybe, you know, like thinking and more writing pamphlets and doing all kinds of stuff. And in general, it's been seen that things that were successful were there was that with diversity of tactics.
Imagine that you were living in Belgium during the day of the multi applications. You would have written some pamphlets and maybe you might have even blown up the railroad too. It wouldn't have made a difference.
Yeah,
It
what
were
do
the
you think?
Americans and the Britons that got rid of the Nazis, who were a very highly centralized force. The Nazis just would have killed a few of their people and a few people of your family because we did that.
Yeah, I could imagine places where people run away from the states go to. And then they become weaker compared to other places, and they become easy to attack and to terminate. But it,
The problem with anarchism is that those who are not anarchists, they can organize better and they can use superior force towards the anarchists who by definition are much more spread out and much more peaceful and
It's also just because it's like, yeah, of course they're already in power, and it's also because there's like.
no, it's not just because they're already in power.
I think also because there's like more consent and there's like a bigger base and something.
No, no. I mean, the Mongols conquered almost the half of Eurasia. They didn't have much power initially, they didn't have much centralization, they were just very good at horse riding and shooting with arrows and bows, and they had a very good strategy of moving very quickly into something, just killing everybody, and they went out again. It's an extremely simple tactic, but yeah, it made them very powerful.
What's the definition of power? To be really quickly and
I feel that. From somewhere else.
For physics, yes. In physics, power is defined as the amount of energy per unit of time. That's the watts of a lamp. A powerful lamp uses more energy per unit of time.
When you say legislation, you don't mean making laws, you mean to run the country.
to make rules, not laws.
Okay, but also executing, because that's a different thing.
No.
If we have making rules, but then using them, like the legislation and the executive government and the judges. You mean the whole package or just making rules?
No, the whole package. The executive is completely out
Out
Yes.
of
of the thought experience. So I mean, making rules, which also includes the rule of how do you manage justice. But the executive is more political figure that I completely leave out because of its political constitution. It's how you make rules.
But how can one block what your experiment with people directly destroying forests somewhere?
How what, sorry?
So you said my system may be not good because some people can decide to drill a mine in forest. To me that's already execution. Or do they quickly devise a law that is allowed and then they execute? I mean, I think you have to clean up the people. Is it lawmaking or rulemaking, as you call it, or is it everything? I think it's not is confused.
So, yeah, I was referring to coding things that you're going to make automatic in the system. Because for other things that don't have direct action, like, let's see, sexual orientation, something that doesn't really have any effect in the general community, then for me that's just more a matter of controversy than an actual something that touches the real world. It's not, it's so, shouldn't be debated politically. It's just a fact.
Okay. Can you give an example of what would be people
What do
in
you
this
mean?
way? So it's not sexual orientation. What is an example for instance, the age at which you require,
Ah, okay. No.
or the rules in traffic,
Yes, yes,
maximum
yes.
speed?
Yes,
these
yes,
things?
yes. No. Yes, exactly.
These are part of the experiment.
No, they are not bad because it's just a thought experiment. But things like age of regulation, no, because it would be an anarcho-capitalist world where there is no age of retirement, for example. But there are things that are in the common place, like traffic, like airports, or some other things that are also from the private sphere that involve, that do need some sort of regulation, like child abuse and animal abuse.
And everything that affects the ecosystem negatively.
Oh, huh?
If you burn lots of fossil fuel, it may be good for you, but it's bad for everybody else.
Exactly.
I think it would help to clarify what part of the government is in the scope of our thought experiment. So I understand how it's the making of the rules.
I would say that the rules should be such that everything that negatively affects other people and the ones who are involved in the activity should somehow be constrained. It's some kind of constraint that tries to let people not do the things that could harm others. Like, for example, driving drunk on the roads or driving on the wrong side of the roads.
I agree, I just want to clarify. But and then it would be interesting to see, you talk about coding, that is a bit,
About what?
you talked about coding,
Yes.
but isn't it just writing text?
Writing the code. Yes.
Why are you doing code for traffic and everything?
Yes. And that's why I was talking about, oh, this can be hacked.
No, I mean, why do you code and not just rules?
Well,
Written rules.
it's a fuzzy transition between code, which is the formalized part of the computer understands, and rules, which is the natural language part that humans understand, but that's kind of a continuum between them. And ideally, if you can code it, you make it more explicit, you can automate it. For example, you could, in principle, automate the tax laws so that people fill in their tax form online and the taxes are automatically reduced according to all the rules. You don't need to have somebody study the whole tax law and look at your tax law and interpret the tax law in order to decide how much you have to pay.
No.
But not all, but the problem is that not all laws can be codified. Like, what is child abuse? Somebody, human, will have to decide about it. A computer cannot say what's the difference between doing this to your child and hitting it so that it's hurts the privacy.
Of course it can.
I find it a necessary complication of the thought experiment to what as code, especially if you talk about rules about human society. So
I think it comes from the open source community where they see, when they speak about code is the law of cyberspace. And then the opposite idea is that, well, if code is the law of cyberspace, why don't we make also the normal laws more like code? That means things that can follow open source principles, meaning that people can work on the programs and improve them and test them and find bugs and fault them, which typically does not happen with laws. Laws going to be put there once and for all, and then it costs a lot of time and a lot of effort to maybe 20 years later change it.
well, it would be interesting to see this flexibility in creation of good. Who does what, when is it then effective, and what happens with next versions of it.
Yeah, that is a tricky part. The process should be such a flexible so that new information comes in. For example, suppose you notice that the rules against speeding don't work well and you want to reduce the maximum speeds. You should be able to do that as quickly as possible. On the other hand, if the code changes all the time, it should also be able to get into effect as quickly as possible. And in the old system, it doesn't work because everybody is supposed to learn all those new rules. Or if you make it more like code, it kind of gets automatized. So it's like everybody has engagement that downloads the latest version of the rule, it gets automatically updated. And the moment you drive in your car, your agent will tell you you are speeding. Even though the day before, at the same stretch of road, you were driving the same road, same speed, it didn't say that, because the law has changed.
But that I find easy quite to imagine. My question is about people sitting at their desk in their home, dispersed or distributed and making rules. And then to the rule that says, okay, 70 and that. So when we decide it must be 70 per hour, and then it's automatically in all the cars, I agree with this part, and I say 65, another 75.
Well,
So
for
how
that
do
you
we
need
how do we-
to put kind of intelligence democratic procedures, and by democratic intelligent procedure, I mean something that's not just the majority of whoever happens to be there decides.
No, no.
Yeah. And that's one thing I wanted to tell you. Something it's a topic I always bring up in seminars. I tell them it's a very already many times. It's a system developed by one of my former students, Michael Rodriguez.
Spartocracy.
Smart.
Yes, I know it. Yes, yes,
I
yes, yes.
know.
Yes, yes, yes,
I
yes.
don't.
We have an interview pending.
You have a what?
A Skype interview.
Ah,
pending.
yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. But I think that anyway it wouldn't be that, the emphasis wouldn't be that much on the who, but you can just with a bunch of evolutionary algorithms and they would live better than you sitting down in your house and listening to
Evolutionary algorithms.
Yeah, because you use models.
That's maybe still a little bit idealistic.
The local optimist, that's the main problem. When you want to optimize, they don't always If you have comparisons using evolutionary algorithms, neural networks compared to a system which is driven by the mechanisms that drive the immune system, but not explained as the mainstream theory and alternative theory about it. And there is also sort of an algorithm based on that, which can compare the effectiveness used on one single case, which is dynamic user profiles of the website. So how different behavior can change, can account for the long-term interest and short-term shifts of interest of users depending on what you do. So, this was compared to other optimization algorithms and works much better. But that it's not following the main.
There's a general problem that all machine learning methods are good for certain things, not for other things, and you don't know a priori when it will be.
That's not machine learning. It's a very important difference. That's not machine learning.
No, but genetic algorithms is a form of machine learning.
That's not that algorithm. It's a completely different self-assertion algorithm for identity management. It's dynamically in a different way. It's better to other different choices, and then what happens, it reacts the way to maintain identity, which means the way the system works is killing pathogens, but also killing own not working well for the identity cells. And it uses huge repertoire of mutating antigens. So it's just an alternative way to construct such a thing, to self-organize in a way to be viable, maintaining identity.
But there are lots of good techniques inspired by nature that can be used to find flaws in things like that. And then there's also the simple principle like this is the many eyeballs, the more people look at it and try to find weaknesses in it. And that is also why it's good to do it together, because suppose you're writing a legislation with, let's say, 3 ministers, you might put in several on what they agree about and overlook quite something that they have used 30,000 people to look at it. It's very important. What would happen in this particular case? Like, what would the law say that doesn't seem right?
Really, these kind of examples would help because I'm trying to imagine what will I do as a human in this whole system. And the example you give is like, okay, there's somebody who gives a start, and then you can critique it, say, this won't work, and then, okay, next steps, there will be some iterations, and then at some point we'll be separate. That's what I try to imagine, and I think it would help to clarify a few things, and to feel a little bit problems to disappear because they don't exist.
There should already be cases, I know that in Australia they have an experiment with an important source that can write the constitution. So we should look at how that happened and what worked and what didn't work. I know in Belgium there has also been an experiment with what they call the G1000, where they chose 1,000 citizens from all walks of life to discuss a number of typical difficult political problems that otherwise the government would do. And then through the discussion afterwards they gave recommendations to the politicians. At apparently the experiment was only half successful. So what came out was not the actually, it was not impressive.
I will take note.
But actually, we know the people who developed the software system behind this. It's called synchrotron. It's a kind of collective intelligence system where you can take huge number of people, let them formulate ideas and opinions, and still without it becoming too messy, come to some kind of conclusion. It's not enough to write laws, but it's at least a good way to take a large number of people and kind of find what are the most important ideas that they agree about. Then putting it into law will be another problem, but it might be a start. It might be a start.
Well, you have to start by identifying things first.
Yeah.
Either as an individual or as a collective.
Well, what they use synchrotron for is mostly for identifying problems and solutions. It's used in companies where they ask all the different employees like what could go work better, what doesn't work well in the company, or what should we do differently, and then lots of different ideas come up, and then thanks to the kind of a smart selection system, we go step by step first. You get feedback from the people in your immediate neighborhood, but anonymously, so you don't know who. And the more people like what you do, the larger the neighborhood becomes to reach that vote. And if it goes always higher up, it's always a larger group of people that vote for it until it reaches the top, and everybody votes on it. So I get probably the best ideas bubble to the top. And people can change the ideas and add to the ideas while they are kind of propagating and bubbling up. It's quite a small system.
That works in companies, but that doesn't work in government because usually when, let's say that one of their very outdated software needs an improvement, because any type of improvement. So what usually happens is that people ask their superiors, hey, we have this problem here. And months later it gets taken into account. So those superiors ask these people, hey, what's the problem that you have with the software? And they send the feedback. And then this one contacts the one on top, and this person hires an outsourcing company to come and with the information that this two levels up person gave, then he or she with that information, then the outsourcing group does some improvement, and then months later, so it's not a direct,
In the synchrotron,
so it would be really good if
in the synchrotron thing, the idea is that everybody is at his computer at the same time. Let's say you have a session of 2 hours, and people start by giving ideas or making proposals or asking questions, and then the best ones of those get improved upon and spread further and further and bubble up. And then at the end, you have the best ideas that are kept, and you don't know where they came from, and different people contributed to them. Or like if you have an idea, since it's anonymous, nobody knows where the idea came from. The cleaning lady of the director general.
that's good.
And to do remember the problem of the system. The ideas that are so good that not a lot of people, or maybe very few people understand it. They do not go up.
That's
So actually, this is
one
kind
of
of
the
that's like
dangers, yeah. It's one of the dangers, which is why you need also something like smartocracy, because a smartocracy would give higher weight to the people that are most trusted as a kind of an authority badge.
The way stakeholder works, for example. People with reputation have more rights to vote, to edit, to...
Yes. And but then you cannot have fast starts. Let's say you cannot come up with I don't know another relativity theory or whatever. You have to kind of build up your reputation slowly by doing things that people understand. And only then, having this reputation, you can come up with something that's groundbreaking. Otherwise, it won't work.
The smartocracy is smarter than that because it uses the equivalent of a PageRank algorithm. Because I'm a young student, I haven't proven anything yet, I have a brilliant idea. I managed to convince a very eminent professor to look at my idea, and that professor endorses it. Suddenly my reputation goes up much more than if 10 of my first students would have endorsed it. It's like in PageRank, if you get one link from a very highly reputed website, it counts much more than if you get 100 links from websites that nobody cares about.
All I'm saying is not without problems.
No, I mean, none
So
of these
I
things are
don't think
trivial.
that it's a
I know,
bad
I
system.
know, I know. None of these things are trivial. It's quite a sophisticated issue which deserves a lot of thinking. But I think we have elements of solutions. And smartocracy is one of the best ones I've seen up to now. But it's of course only part of the solution. We need other things. And what we are working on actually is that you have to formulate the rules. Too much language in the formulate rules. You can use natural language, but then it tends to remain vague and people may discuss about interpretations. So we are trying to develop a protocol where you can express rules in a way that say that the computer will understand, but also in a way that the people will understand it. And then you can try to formulate the rules more precisely, and then the system can apply the rules. And you can look at the situation with the speed control that your car will automatically slow down because yesterday the new law went into effect that the speed control is only the maximum speed is only 70, reduced to 90. That's a simple example. We were thinking about more sophisticated forms of organization, offer networks. You will hear more about it.
Oh, definitely.
You
Hear
definitely
more
need to read
about
about it. You need to read my paper about offer networks.
I will.
I think I would like to go what Ivo mentioned about blockchain.
About?
Blockchain, you seem to not
About what?
blockchain.
Okay.
It likes you haven't heard it or
No, I have. Yeah.
do you know about BitNation and all this?
BitNation,
BitNation? They're building kind of virtual government on top of blockchain. So if you don't, it's kind of very related to what you are saying. So you have to check on.
Also, I
Tell
think
me
here,
about it.
there was a guy who made a presentation a year or two ago, Simon Nathalie.
Yes.
About doing legislation as, he's a programmer for that.
Yeah, Smiley McCarthy, you should definitely look into him. He is in the Pirate Party in Iceland, and at a certain moment, he even looked as if they would get into the majority government, and they had very similar ideas like that. They might even.
Doesn't he have one project in Ethereum?
I don't know what.
I don't think that was that.
in Bosnia or somewhere there.
And his seminar is online on our website, so I don't know whether you might have other things.
Can you check it out on the internet?
Huh?
Use open.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good that you reminded me of that.
That was the first thing I thought when I saw that, because he just proposed that and he made a few prototypes even.
That was 2 years ago, so why not? He might have. But I know, I spoke with Harry, who gave the seminar together with Smiley, and Harry said, and that was in October, I think, that it looked as if they might actually get in governance. Of course, if they get in government, he probably will be more busy with the political process more than with thinking about these kind of issues. But then it will become a very interesting experiment if they would really be in government and try to start to apply these kind of principles.
She's very good at it.
Yeah.
One of the known programmers that are most good at it. Smiley McCarthy. He's half Icelandic, half Scottish, I think. Irish.
He's like the Pirate Party in Iceland. He's the head of the Pirate Party.
Yeah. Now he has a website where you can publish things and publish
And another thing that's relevant, it's called, I think, the deliberatorium. It's a kind of a system for collective intelligence developed at MIT, where people can deliberate in a smart way by formulating issues, subdividing into sub-issues, attaching arguments, attaching counter-arguments, and they had a big one about global warming, about what to do about global warming. I don't know whether there have been any recent developments, because it was a couple of years ago when that happened. It seemed a very interesting experiment, but I'm a little bit afraid that these kind of discussions might get very complex afterwards, so you would need some kind of algorithms to clean up the network that arises. It's definitely worth looking at this.
What's the full name?
Deadly Beratorium.
Okay.
It had a different name
Ah,
before.
yeah. Yeah.
Collective intelligence lab or something like this. You can
Collective intelligence. And what's again the name of the guy that developed it?
Malone?
No, it's not Malone. It's a colleague of him.
Okay. I know who we are talking about.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't remember it. And I think there is.
If you look in Google Scholar, one of the topics behind my name is collective intelligence. If you click on it, you get his name just next to mine because we have about the same number of citations.
Japanese name?
No. American maybe.
Klein? No?
Klein? Mark Klein. Was it Mark Klein?
Let's
I
see.
think it might be Mark Klein.
You mentioned something 1000 here in Belgium. What was
The
it?
G1000 it was called.
G.
So the idea was to select kind of randomly 1,000 citizens that were volunteering to spend quite some time sitting together using this kind of computer system to discuss some difficult political issues and suggest solutions to the government. So it worked, but not spectacular.
Yeah, Mark Klein.
Is it Mark Klein?
There is a paper, Programming Global Brain, Bernstein, Klein, and Malone. So,
Yeah.
That's
But that's,
This is another one.
but that was basically Bernstein who was here also for a seminar. But Mark Klein has been the guy behind the Deliberatorium.
If you have a very strong comparison, I can make you have a very strong comparison, I can make I'm for time and look
And yeah, the links are big. But there are quite some interesting things. Michael Rodriguez and his girlfriend, what was her name? Jennifer. Well, they together wrote a paper, a kind of a review paper on collective intelligence, collective decision-making systems. But there it's more about decision-making, more in the sense of choosing options than creating options. Well, what people are creating the different rules. And therefore, wikis do that, but there is not much theory of how a wiki works, except stick merging, which is what my paper is about, so the one on the open access.
Right.
Which is also neat. And I suppose for Carlos we have had this automated bureaucracy paper, which is a nice idea, but maybe a little bit too simplistic for this kind of things.
that kind of thinking around, of course, the classics of Karl Weick.
Karl Weick, its organization, I haven't read much of him.
Not only in social fields who are after women's, one of the few on the way he approaches sense making, rational mathematics, things. Still, wait for 4 years.
Yeah,
without having-
the few things I've seen of Karl Weick looks quite interesting. And I see him cited by the right kind of people, so I think it's a sin.
Yeah, well,
It's a pity that Malta couldn't be here because she was also citing how like even the proposal we just chose. Yeah, it's a pity that Malta wasn't here because she's interested in legislation and legislation systems and finding alternatives to them. Well, they self-organize, but in a way that is not a good way of self-organizing. I think that you have a system that tends to self-perpetuate and create its own rules and then stick to those rules. It becomes an autopoietic system that just wants to survive, and it's bureaucracy system to be like that.
Yeah.
That's logical.
That's why we have states still.
Yeah. Well, are we going for a beer?
Of course.